an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Elder Empire Shadow Book 3, Prologue, and Chapters 1 and 2. In these chapters, so Shera wants to be the mistress of the mists, even less than I expected. I knew she wasn't going to like this, but I didn't know she was going to hide under a fish bin in a market. Hate it. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you so much to Asher for commissioning this episode. Asher has commissioned the next 2 books, and I really thought, 100% thought, that the following 2 books were going to be on, like, the next episode after I recorded the end of, what was the last one? Of Dawn and Darkness. And then I had to wait, like, 2 weeks? I don't even think it was like quite 2 weeks, but I was so sure that on the day of the recording that I thought it would be, I read without even looking at my calendar. And thankfully, I did go and double check, or else I wouldn't even have had time left to do the reading I was supposed to do for that day. So all that to say, I read this section twice, one of them a little while ago, and I'm very glad to finally be starting on this. Hurrah! So this opens up with a pretty fun, I feel like fun is the wrong word, but also I'm just going to use that. A pretty fun sequence in which we get to see the spookiness of Shera from the outside, which you guys know is like one of my favorite things that Will White does, is shows us what the protagonist, I really hesitate to use that word with Shera sometimes, but she is. She is. She's not a bad person. She's just a little off. When you get to see what the protagonist looks like in action to the people around them. And oftentimes what Will chooses is somebody else who is a pretty much like either expert in their field or somebody who thinks that they know what they're getting into. This is a weird sequence because it's somebody who is totally unaware of the fact that they have been found out. So they're not expecting a fight. They're not expecting the consultant, certainly. Even if they were expecting a fight, I think this is the last thing they would think would happen. And it's also so very slowly sort of worked up to what creeps they are. So I'm going to start from this opening, you guys. This is, look, I'm not going to say, just straight out of the gate, I'm not going to say anybody who is sacrificing a tiny cute animal at the beginning of a story is going to be a bad guy. Sometimes in stories, you've got like people who are doing good and they have to make a sacrifice, and what are you going to do? And I accept this even though I don't like it. But this was done in such a soft sort of way. So it says, Tariq cradled the baby leaf crawler in his arms, glancing around the misty morning for any prying eyes. Cradled implies that it's like an animal that he's got some affection for. The chimera squirmed in his hands, roughly the size and shape of a green-tinged baby rabbit with a bud of a flower emerging from its head. It would grow into the ability to ensure quick and healthy harvests, so leaf crawlers were favorites of farmers the world over. Some less scrupulous alchemists could make supernaturally effective fertilizer with their body parts, but the practice was frowned on by the guild. Tariq laughed at himself as he slipped through a gap that one of his friends had knocked in the fence. This leaf crawler wasn't going to grow into anything. okay, Tariq, babe, I don't know who hurt you, but you've got to go see somebody about this. When you're cradling an adorable baby bunny, basically, and you're cackling over how it's not going to, like, grow up, yikes. So, and this is the sort of thing that, you know, you guys are aware. I've been trying in some ways to sort of extend Irene the like, benefit of the doubt here and there. And then we meet other sleepless that are like this. And I just don't really know what to make of it. Like, I don't feel like Irene is somebody who would behave this way. I certainly think that she would make the sacrifice. But I don't think she'd be, like, delighted about it or looking forward to it or laughing. But she'd do it. And granted, in any organization, there are going to be people who are part of this organization for their own reasons. And some are going to be real believers, and some are maybe sadists who are taking advantage of the situation. But it's just really difficult to, like, withhold judgment on the sleepless at large based on what I have seen. And I know I don't know everything. I can't imagine how much info, like, you guys know that I have this sort of weird, like, subconscious suspicion that maybe the elders aren't as horrible in certain ways as we have thought. And that's really the only reason I have this suspicion is because Will oftentimes doesn't play it quite as straight as you think. That's not to say he's a big fan of twists. He doesn't, like, overuse them. He uses them. But it doesn't ever feel like he's always going to try and subvert things just to make a point. He'll subvert things because that's a good idea and good writing. But it doesn't ever feel like it's just for the sake of it. So I'm not saying that I think maybe the elders are going to turn out to have been good, actually. But I'm saying that when we see what they're capable of, from the outside perspective of, like, humans who have a very limited understanding, yeah, it looks really fucking horrifying. But also, like, finding out that they're sort of trapped here has changed things in my mind for me. And there could be something that, yeah, we don't, like, agree with a lot of their methodology or some of their motivations, but maybe if we actually stopped and communicated somehow, we would find we have the same common goal after all. And you don't have to really be on the same side so much as just aiming to achieve the same ends and then go your separate ways about it. So I've been sort of, like, wondering if that is maybe the thing. But we're into the final duo of books. And I cannot imagine how much he would have to pack in order to make that the case. And I didn't check, full disclosure, like, the overall length of this book in comparison to the others. So I don't know if it's a lot longer or anything. I haven't checked that. But my like, suspicion about this maybe twist feels like it's sort of growing thinner by the day. It just doesn't seem like it's actually going to be either as simple as I think it is, or maybe a twist at all. And if that's the case, if there's no twist, and it really is like, no, we just really have to stop the elders, they're fucking psycho, and we can't live in a world with them. If that is the case, that's too simple. I just don't think it is. I just said that my faith in that suspicion is growing thinner by the day. You know what? No, it's not. It's simply that my, like, understanding of how this could be pulled off is growing thinner. I'm not even going to attribute it to the suspicion itself. It's my limited understanding as an ignorant reader. That's really what's growing thin. My understanding. So George says, I think it's a little bit longer. Also, maybe in the last episode, I can bring up the interesting writing timeline for this series. Oh, okay, yeah. I would be very interested to hear that. So, all this to say, basically, that the Sleepless feel so cartoonishly awful at some times. And then very morally gray at other times, or even attempting to like do good, but in that way that's like, yeah, could you not try to help? You're making it worse. That I'm all over the place as to what to think about them and what to think of Jyrene and whether or not maybe she's right. And I don't know. So anyway, he's thinking about how he's going to another one of these like sleepless meetings, and the way that these usually go, which I really did appreciate because this feels like exactly the thing. They rarely accomplished anything during those meetings. It was mostly a way to complain about things that would be, to complain about the state of the Empire and dream of all the things that would be possible once they were rewarded with elder knowledge. And honestly, that struck me as so incredibly true. Like, so many things that have meetings, like even hobbies, the subject matter of the hobby plays about a 30% role, and the longing for a different version or complaining about things, changes, I don't know, that takes up so much more time, and just being like, oh, I can't wait until such and such. And that's how church is. I mean, church is basically all about, oh, you guys are gonna love dying. It's the best. You cannot imagine how great it's going to be after you died. Right now, garbage, trash. But one day, you're going to be dead. And trust me, the tits, amazing. And that's kind of like most of it. There's occasionally sort of, hey, be good. But mostly it's like, hopefully our propaganda about how great being dead will be is going to motivate you to be good, and we don't have to like say it. So anyway, he is really excited because since today, this is not going to be a all talk meeting. They are going to do some shit. Inside, the guild had once kept rare chimera and exotic plants from all over the world for the pleasure and education of the viewing public. Now, thanks to the imperialists, the Green Wardens had been driven out of the lands surrounding the capital. These doors were chained shut and the windows boarded up. There would be no chimera roaming beneath the glass sky. It was perfect for a pre-dawn meeting with no witnesses. And I was very curious about this. The Green Wardens are driven off? Why is that? Why would that happen? He blames the imperialists, and like, I'm not sure whether to trust that or not, but it doesn't feel like it would be really of import unless it's supposed to be like a result of the clashes between guilds and stuff. It just was surprising to me. But anyway, yeah, so he's basically like going to the local arboretum that's been abandoned, and they're going to do their ritual in there. And he goes in. This adorable little like Pokemon that he is carrying is set down in this spot, and it turns out to just be like kind of a little snacky snack, a treat. We'll give you one Pokemon as a treat. But he comes in, and it says, as it had been his job to locate a baby chimera, the others had handled creating the mirrors, each of which had to bathe in the blood of an unwilling victim every day for at least a week in order to build up the intent necessary for this ritual. Elder Spawn loved the scent of bloodlust. Word? Like, I just don't. It's not for me, dog. I don't think so. And it just says unwilling victim. And I could even, like, try and comfort myself imagining that those were animals. Which I already am mad enough about this one animal. But I don't think so, probably. I don't think so. And the fact that this is something that you have to do to summon this creature because the vibe of murdering people is what it's drawn to. I just don't know how you think this is a thing you want to fuck with. Like, really? So then we have a woman with a tambourine, a man with drums, and Tariq with a small flute. These objects had also been cultivated most carefully, handed down from previous generations of the cult with the sole intent of calling the attention of the Ancient Ones. Which actually is pretty dope. At first, when he starts the list with a woman with a tambourine, I definitely snorted a little bit because, like, the tambourine is just not a dignified instrument. Let's be honest, it's not. Like, there's some instruments that you find out somebody plays it and you're like, oh. Then there are some instruments you find somebody plays it and you're like, oh, shit, yeah. Like, it's just something that's inherently cool. And then there's, like, a tambourine or even a harmonica, although I put an asterisk after that. It just doesn't, like, it doesn't give the vibe of the kind of solemnity that you would expect with a ritual like this. But it's fine. So they start their shit and immediately they begin to feel that their music is, like, different than usual. And he hears what he thinks is almost an unearthly chorus joining in. And I was very curious if this was actually happening or if it was his imagination. Because Tariq he clearly has a sort of, like, idealistic feels like the wrong word, but I'm going to go with it. He has a very idealized version of what it is they're doing here. And I could easily see somebody who thinks a lot of themselves and a lot of, like, the ritual they're doing, convincing themselves that, like, there are other forces at work here. They agree with us and they're encouraging us and joining us. And then up out of the earth in the center of their circle comes this giant worm. And Tariq is straight up shocked because apparently, as much as he had total faith that this would work, he didn't really think it would work. And he said something earlier about how he had seen miracles, but apparently not like this. He seems much more blindsided by it than I was expecting. I thought that there would be simple, like, pride and excitement, but what we get first is, quote, shock and startled fear. The chasm mouth was not a friendly elder, so to speak. It would not share in its knowledge with them. It saw humans as food. But with the proper preparations, it could be directed. So basically this worm says, where do I feed? AKA, who you sicking me on? And Tariq has this fucking speech that is so overwrought. "O great one of the Worm Lord, we beg you to feed on those of the Alchemist's Guild, only 1,000 paces to the east of this location. You will deprive the guilds of some of their brightest minds, plunging the Empire further into cleansing chaos." Calm down, sir. This is like... I'm not trying to say that this sentence does just not make sense. It makes sense. It's perfectly coherent as a sentence. But it's dancing right on the edge of that thing that some people do where they, like, take... they get out a thesaurus and they just go to town with it and don't really understand the slight nuances in how certain words are used versus others. And so their shit comes out sounding like they're trying too hard. And that's what I'm getting here. It's just too much, sir. Calm down. So, and it says it had taken him 3 nights to write and memorize. Tariq, 3 nights? You gotta up your game, man. Too late. Anyway, their cousin who worked for the Alchemist's Guild had heard a rumor that Count Natalia was getting a delivery of rare materials today. A strike could disrupt their ability to produce potions and elixirs for months. The Cabal would reward them handsomely. And that was really interesting. The Cabal would reward them handsomely. obviously he believes in this whole elder thing. It feels like he's genuinely a devotee of this. But he is also doing it for money. And honestly, the idea that like Sleepless is going to pay people for the hits they do comes as an unexpected piece of news. I'm not entirely shocked, because once you stop and think about it, I guess you kind of have to run things that way, or else how is anything going to get done unless everybody is as completely rabid about the cause as you are, which you can't guarantee. But I guess I did just assume everybody was that committed that money wouldn't really be a factor. And I don't know why I thought that, because money is literally always a factor. Like, no matter what somebody's motivations are, money's often in the mix somewhere in there. Whether it's gaining or trying to not lose. So at this point, the worm says, "Not alone." And at first I thought what he meant was, I'm not attacking them by myself. What he means is somebody's here. And then we get the beginnings of hints that Shera is here, which I did not pick up on until Shera turns up. I was like, oh, right, the mist power, because I'm not used to her having this. So it says, to his surprise, the mist had thickened. It now looked like a gray wall only inches from his face. And I should have fucking heard the words gray wall, but I didn't notice. Not a wisp had crossed between the 6 members of the Sleepless. It was as though the presence of the Elder Spawn was keeping the mist at bay. He couldn't imagine that this burrowing worm's powers included summoning or controlling fog, but who knew what logic applied to the Elders? Which, I mean, that's fair. They don't have a lot of logic that I can follow a lot of the time, so... And then the tambourine falls to the ground, and the woman who was playing it is gone. And the dude who was playing the drums slumps over them, and there's blood pooling on the cloth of his back. And then Tariq sees another dude, like, he finally turns and runs. And I like this line, "Plunging into the mist to escape felt like diving into the ocean to flee a hungry shark." Truly, that is a great line, because this is how I feel about so many different things I read where somebody's being chased and they have to like make a split second decision about where to go. And for example, the final chapters of the Suki book that I'm covering with Miles, she's in the house and has to decide whether or not to try and leave to get help because they cut the phone lines, or whether or not she's going to try and like make it in the house. And she finally decides anybody who's really determined is going to be able to break in and probably break through the locks on anything they want by smashing hard enough. So her best bet is to leave the house and go out into the woods. And the logic of that makes total sense. But I just don't think I would have been that smart. Going out where the bad man is, I don't see it. She was right. But I wouldn't have done it, and I'd have been dead, probably. I'd have depended way too much on flimsy, like, door locks. So this dude gets chased for a bit. He thinks that he has, like, gotten away, but then realizes that the sounds, he's kind of right back where he started. And he's just like, how the fuck did I do this? Which is such a thing, apparently, with human beings when we walk. If we can't see where we're going and we don't have a good sense of direction to guide us, we will go in a circle. And it depends, I'm sure, on the circumstances, how big that circle winds up being. But this is like a documented thing. And finally, this figure in gray that has a knife in the Elder Spawn's body stands up and turns to him, and she says, "Take him." A black bag settled over Tariq's head. He screamed. It did him no good. And we find out later that Shera didn't participate in the questioning of Tariq. She went to bed, as is her wont. But I sort of like stopped and realized I don't know anything about how the oh my God. Guys, why am I wanting to call them the counselors? Why is my brain does this sometimes. It just throws a word in the trash. And then it's like, no, yeah, this word is closed. This'll do. Why? That was a perfectly good word. You did not need to throw it away. Oh my God. The consultants are questioning, and I don't know anything about the way that they do that, but I have to assume that that's some torture, right? And I haven't really heard a lot about Shera's feelings on that. I'm assuming it wouldn't bother her that much. I have to imagine Lucan would not have liked this because he tended to be a lot more sensitive. Maya, I don't know. I think she'd probably find it distasteful, but would do her duty. But I'm just curious about it. So, chapter 1. We are in Rainworth. And this is where Shera is hiding. And we get an interesting opening to this chapter. The translated ramblings of an elder-touched mad woman in the care of the Luminian Order, translation widely disputed. Which I would love to hear some alternative interpretations of this translation. The king will open / discover / become the door to us. He will allow us to escape / live / return. The killer is made to slay those like him. If she survives, she will not allow him to live / reign / evolve. This feels like not for us. This feels like the elders become the door to us, allow us to escape, return. They're the ones that are trying to get back to somewhere, right? So he is somehow a conduit for them, or, and the killer is made to slay those like him. How literal is the word made in this scenario? Like, the fact that she doesn't seem to have human emotions the way we're used to makes me wonder if that's not a lot more literal than I would ordinarily interpret it. And then, if she survives, she will not allow him to live / reign / evolve. Now, like, why wouldn't she? Because she's made and can't help it? Or is it because of some motivation that's like, apparently maybe them getting out of this world would hurt the world or cause there to be like a permanent sort of opening between the two worlds that then people wouldn't be able to escape from? I don't know. But I found this extremely compelling. Obviously, this is something that I would, if I were like taking notes on things, this would be something I would highlight and put at the very front of my little notebook. So, Shera is here, and she is hiding under dry boxes full of fish. And she thinks that she's like in a pretty good spot, and then she hears Yala. And Shera pulls her feet in tighter like a little girl playing hide and seek. And is thinking, man, if Yala is here in person, she probably like tracked me and knows that I'm here. But she can't know for sure. And Shera is totally willing to just rest on this and to hell with her own dignity. And at this point, the tablecloth lifts up and Carrion peeks in. And I really want to know exactly how Carrion could tell she was there, because, like, I don't remember how much Carrion can feel. Readers can feel intent. So if somebody, like, got close enough to this table, they might have been able to feel her trying to hide, you know? I don't know, but maybe Carrion was just looking underneath every table. And she sees Shera and says, "What are you doing, Guildhead?" And Shera says, "Guild business. This is a top secret assignment." I can't even like get mad at that. That is so funny to me. Oh my God. Shera trying to slack, cutting class is a mood, honestly. So at this point, Carrion ducks under there and sits with Shera. And Shera notes how, oh yeah, she gets to wear black, but I don't get to wear black anymore. And hers is a gray outfit, meant for blending into Bastion's veil. She didn't care how it looked. She cared that it set her apart. Yala had ordered it especially for her from the day Shera had bound her second vessel, and the guild had named her Mistress of the Mists. And I just can't trust Yala in any way, so as much as I want to just interpret this as her doing something for tradition, I can't help but be like, oh, or she's doing this because it will somehow sabotage Shera, and that could also be it. So at this point, Shera is just like, I don't want to do this. And there has to be somebody else that's better for the job who actually does want it. And it turns out the regents are going to be coming for a meeting. And she wants Yala to do it without her. But Carrion is like, the regents know you and trust you. And they were pretty excited, actually, that you were going to be heading the consultants and like representing them. And that was interesting as well. They don't express any like overt real like admiration. It just feels like respect when she meets them. But maybe that in itself is sort of a show of respect. I don't know. And Shera's like, I mean, I'll put on a show for the rest of the guild and I'll round up Sleepless, but I don't know why we need a guild head. And this is when she's thinking about how like Maya could maybe do it. Carrion herself could maybe do it. And then she has a moment of thinking of Lucan. And she has to like really deliberately push that away. And it becomes clear in this interaction and a couple of others that the grief from losing Lucan is sort of permeating everything she's doing lately. There is a sense of overwhelm to her response that I think is probably like even more than... This is the sort of thing that human beings do, is when we run into an emotion that is uncomfortable and it's related to something that we aren't well-versed in dealing with. We'll sometimes nudge things so that the emotion looks like it's coming from something else. So, for example, you find out that your mother is really sick and has cancer. She needs a certain type of like food, and you go to the store to get it, and they're out of food. They're out of this like one thing that she needs. And you lose your mind on some poor hourly store associate because they're out of the thing. And you're not mad at them. It's not about the food. It's about the fact that your mother is sick and you're fucking helpless and can't do anything about it. And what I feel here is Shera just lost Lucan. And then she gets saddled with this massive responsibility that she did not want or ask for, that is just so outside of her comfort zone and the way that she likes to function in the shadows. And on top of having lost her best friend and having exactly 0 time, by the way, to process that before this battle begins, she is retreating and telling herself it's like the job that's getting to her, when, sure, I don't think that she would ever want this job, even in the best of circumstances, but I think she's trying to process what happened to Lucan, or she's not trying to process it, and she's literally running from it the way that she's running from her job. That's just my take, because like I said, she hasn't had a lot of time, man. This is... I don't know how far after the events of the last book I get the feeling that it's like a week, maybe? But it's really in the space of time that she has had, combined with the responsibilities dropped on her, that's not going to leave wiggle room to actually like feel things and work through anything. And I just really feel for her in this. I don't know what to think of. Lucan's death just was very unexpected. It really was. So at this point, Carrion says, "For our sake, Shera, please play this role. Stop acting like a child and help us." And Shera has to be like, "Yeah, I am acting like a child." And finally, she's like, all right, here we go. She puts her hand on her vessel and we get something so different. Bastion, the second of her soul-bound vessels, waited there with placid detachment. "We will cleanse and protect," the vessel whispered to her. "Cleanse and protect." Its message calmed her and helped her focus, which made her glad for the absence of her other vessel. Cyphron was anything but calming. Now, Cyphron is just straight up broken, right? Because I remember the last time we saw it, it had been pierced with a weird nail that obviously was invested in some way by Bliss, and all of the like life basically had seemed to drain out of it. I don't remember if Shera picked it up and like took it with her when she left, or like, you know, basically is it sitting somewhere in her possession waiting to be repaired, or is that thing kind of a done deal and left behind entirely? So they leave from underneath the table, and Yala is standing there waiting and snaps that they're late, and they begin to walk and talk. And it turns out this was very so this moment we get something about Rainworth. Everyone working on the Rainworth docks and in this fish warehouse was employed by the Consultants Guild. They were either masons performing a mundane job in order to keep information flowing back to the consultants, or workers hired to keep their eyes open. Even so, Shera and the High Counselors took a hidden exit. So they're basically recovering pretty quickly. I have to admit, good for you. You didn't have a contingency plan already in place that I know of. Maybe you did, but I don't think so. And you're rolling with the punches. Seems like a good call. So they step out into this like area, and she uses Bastion's veil here to sort of not only conceal their movement, but it also helps to sort of dampen sound a little bit. And she says, Carrion, "Strange weather we're having." And Yala says that she's going to begin her report. "The alchemists are trying something tomorrow morning." Oh yeah, here it is. Had they made any progress with Cyphron? I completely forgot that this is actually mentioned. I've read this section twice, you guys. "The alchemists are trying something tomorrow morning, but our readers are convinced it won't work. Blackwatch spikes are invested with intent so strange that they might be elder devices themselves. It would be better to consult the regents." And it turns out the spike had like fused with it. Shera was grateful Cyphron's voice was now gone from her head, but she needed its power back to continue fighting elders and imperialists. And then Yala brings up the regents. And she's like, "I'm going to tell you everything because we have to keep up our mystique about the fact that we know everything before we should. So this is info that they're going to tell you like it's new, and we're going to need you to be like, oh yeah, I knew this already. Old news. We have managed to avoid any direct conflict with the imperialists. As long as they have champion support, we couldn't win a military contest anyway. We've done better on the public opinion front, but the longer that lasts, the more people will panic." And she points, when she says that, to the crack in the sky, which is still there. And Carrion asks if the regents have like managed to do anything with fixing that. And Yala is like, "Not only have they not accomplished anything on that front, I wouldn't bring it up because it's a mighty sore topic for them lately. They feel a bit of a way that they haven't really accomplished what they were intending. So just don't mention it to them." And then she says, Various cults have banded together under the banner of the Sleepless, the Eyes of the Crossing, the Sisters of the Fading Moon, the Lamplighters, all calling themselves Sleepless now. So either this is a coordinated effort of humans to appear united, or the Great Elders have begun uniting their people. And she says we have confirmed that they're the ones that are trying to fuck the guilds up. We think because the Great Elders don't want us to unite. And this is, we get back to basically the like thrust of everything, which is, are they trying to keep us from doing this? Or are they trying to make it look like they don't want us to do the thing so that we'll do the thing? Around and around we go. And then she says the imperialists have made overtures of peace in the name of their imperial steward, Calder Martin. Now, what I found interesting here, Shera's lips tightened, but she couldn't avoid hearing Calder's name. So it sounds very much like Shera holds him responsible, despite Maya being like, he didn't do this. It sounds like she thinks he did. We don't really get more than that. It's just the lips tightening and her not wanting to hear about him, thinking that maybe he should have, like, she would have guessed he'd have been abandoned by everybody now. And the fact that he's still sticking around is surprising. But mostly the thought we get is just about the objective position that he's in. It's not personal about her feelings towards him regarding what happened to Lucan. So I would like to know a lot more about how she's feeling toward him. If she saw him and he was like, I'm so sorry, Jyrene did this, would that help? Or would it just make it worse that Jyrene had been his wife? Like, she still is his wife. And was the reason, like, he was the reason Jyrene ever came in contact with Lucan to begin with, you know? Might go that way. So, our intelligence suggests that Joran has hired a navigator ship under a false name in order to explore something in the deep Aeon. I'm wondering what's going on there. I feel like that's going to be something we might hear about later. Even so, if they have sent both available regions today, they must consider this important. And it turns out they've met with all the other independent guild heads already. This is the last person that they're going to be seeing. So at this point, we come down to the fact that Shera has to make a choice. The Green Wardens and Luminians are for peace. The Alchemists are against it. What about us? That is for you to decide. However, the Council of Architects advises that we take advantage of the opportunity for a ceasefire. Better to be close as possible. We can take advantage of any further opportunities, which Yala agrees with. And this is essentially, Shera says this in much more bald terms later, where she's like, I think it's best to say as close as possible in case we need to stab them in the back. And the regents are both like, yeah. She expects at least one of them to kind of have an issue with what she's saying, and they just don't. And I loved that, because you can be kind and honest and forthright and everything and still have a fucking pragmatic mind. You can. It's hard. I won't lie. But so anyway, a tall woman stood outside, blonde hair and long black coat blowing in the ocean breeze. 3 serpentine skulls floated in orbit around her head. This Esther 6, bitch. And she says the color looks good on Shera, who is about to make a snarky response. But then the other regent says, Mistress of the Mist. It's pretty cool to see another one. It's been a long time. And this is Laura Lee. She would have looked girlish even for a woman of 25, much less a woman who had been born before the Empire. And she is like small, compact. I sort of picture I picture her as like a gymnast kind of build. Honestly, Simone Biles comes to mind a tiny bit. Her outfit resembled a military uniform, though it was entirely white. And she has her hair all in braids. And there's a bit of like interesting commentary about how it might look as if she's got a style honoring somebody in her history because so many other people from the Heartland have their hair done this way. But the truth is she started this trend and they're all just copying. And I love that so much. The idea that like they're honoring someone who still exists and is walking around looking like that. What a cool idea. So anyway, not long ago, Shera had visited the headquarters of the Luminian Order. The entire place exuded an aura of wholesome safety and satisfaction that Shera had immediately distrusted. Loralee seemed like the personification of that aura, formal and serious, but with a warm, compassionate heart beneath. Shera didn't like her. It wasn't as though Loralee couldn't be trusted. If her reputation was to be believed, she might be the most trustworthy person alive, but that alone was unnatural. It made Shera uncomfortable. And honestly, that makes a lot of sense. Like, being sort of weirded out about a person who seems too good to be true is its own thing. But when somebody actually seems to be a pretty good, honest person, and they also embody a lot of values that not only do you not possess, but you don't really see the benefit of necessarily, it's gonna just be like, I just don't even know how to relate to you, you know? So, long story short, they have their little meeting where they sit down, and so Loralee gets a table that has a bunch of fresh water and fruit, and Esther 6 gets wine and like aged and smoked cheeses and meats. Truly, y'all, is there even a contest here? Like, I admire Loralee. Loralee's meal is the meal that I want to want. You know what I'm saying? But Esther 6 is like, that's what I'm actually wanting. Like, let's be real about it. I could go so hard right there, this very moment, for like a nice glass of red wine, a really sharp cheese, and like, I don't know, some Genoa salami or something. You could toss some grapes in there. I'm not going to be mad at you for throwing fruit in with the things. But just fruit and water, not going to do the job, friend. So anyway, I do like to, there's a moment right before they sit down where there are these chalkboards that have, the chalk is controlled by a magnet from an invested other piece of chalk. And so you can take that chalk far, far away and leave the first piece and it will move around and you can basically send long distance messages this way. Essentially a very like janky fax machine situation. And Esther thinks, oh, Joran would fucking love this. And Shera has to be like, I'm pretty sure he came up with these actually. And Esther's like, oh, that makes sense. So they sit here and talk about the deal. Peace between the guilds. And Shera says, we agree. Why? For no reason that Shera could discern, Esther closed one eye and watched Shera's reaction through the lens of her golden wine. I want to know. I am not sure that this is at all actually meaningful, but if it turns out that she has an ability where she can tell if somebody's lying, I'm into it. Conflict between guilds costs too much, and it's stupid to worry about each other when the elders have cracked open the sky. Loralee looked deeply grieved by the mention of the fracture. And Shera's just like, all right, well, that answers that. I guess they have not made any progress. So then Esther sets her glass down and says, what about you? What do you think? And this is when she says the stab them in the back thing. And waits for Loralee to be disapproving. But she just sort of gets thoughtful and she says, if we intend to strike at their leadership, we don't need any sort of treaty. If that's our plan, let's just act now. Land Esther on the roof of the Imperial Palace while a squad of Anharane infiltrate the servants. That was a viable plan. Shera had looked into it. Loralee continued. However, I see little advantage there. Our true enemies are not the guild heads. Our enemies, as they have ever been, are the great elders. And this is when they do the, well, what does he not want to do? The Sleepless have been instructed to deepen the divide between guilds. That suggests the Great Elders don't want us to unify. Blah, 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 blah. Again, around and around in circles. And Shera is just like, man, I don't even know why they're asking me this. I don't have any further information. But she says, I'm going to just keep playing the role I'm here for. You're the experts on the tactics of Great Elders. If you detect any Elder influence, let us know and we can draw blood for real. Until you do, I think we should stay close. And then she quoted Maxwell. There's no one more honest than a man with a dagger to his throat. And they finally lift their glasses and accord. And then it ends with her saying, I'm going to find some food. Because when she comes in, they're the only ones that have anything set out. She is meant to sit there and not eat. And this was actually something pretty fascinating that's going to come up in another book I'm covering with Rashawn, where the king and queen, when they attend a feast, are meant to display their strength by not participating in the feast. They don't eat with everyone. And it's supposed to sort of give them an air of superiority, like they're gods, like they don't need food. And I am sure that they are, given a big full meal before the feast, and that way they're full and it's not meant to be torture. But eating is such a social thing. And if I were just sitting there watching everyone else eat and I had no plate of my own, I would be so uncomfortable. Like, it's just like, this is a thing you do together. That's part of it, And I guess that's the point, is they're not supposed to be like regular people. But I hated that idea, and I hated this for Shera. So then we go to chapter 2. And this is entirely from the perspective of the Emperor. So we get here after he has essentially won the war with the Elders, and him and Esther 6 are staring down at their planet and all of the fires burning and all of the Elders writhing in their death throes. And there is a sense of real accomplishment here, but also trepidation. And we find out that Esther didn't actually know for a fact that the Elders couldn't be killed. So he has to tell her that. And explains, like, we're buying ourselves some time with this, but we're not actually getting rid of them. And he says, I think you had to have suspected this already. And she looks at him and says, then we will destroy them again and again and again and again until it sticks, or until they learn who owns this world. And he is very bolstered by her response to this. And it says, if he could inspire all of humanity with 1/10 of her resolve, they could scour this world clean of elder spawn inside a year. But that would never happen. Esther 6 was 1 in 10 million, and the common man could never rise to her level, which was why he had devised a plan. So this, like, just basically, you can't get good help nowadays. So he's just going to give her a massive bonus to try and keep her on board, so he thinks. Now, he reveals to her that he has a heart of the dead mother. And she thinks he's just kind of keeping this as like a trophy or a power-up. And he tells her he read it and that it was an indirect reading. But it says, one question haunted me. How can we oppose the great ones as mortals? Do we leave the truth to our children, to our children's children? When the terror of the Elders fades to myth and our enslavement is nothing but a legend? And, all you got to do is read Song of Ice and Fire to know how that turns out. The whites are just a myth now. People don't even believe that they're real, so nobody's putting the slightest bit of effort into, like, defending against them. He's not wrong. That is precisely how this would go. And he's like, with this, I'm going to become timeless. I will bind myself to this heart. It will become my soul-bound vessel. And she's like, no, I get that. But if you want to build the empire, it has to be stronger than what we had. How are you going to outdo him? And he says, first of all, we are going to, like, he says the greatest weapon of the elders is human ignorance. When we first began to observe the world around us, we discovered reading. We created Soulbound. We crafted instruments. To know the universe is to control it, and by the time Nicothea and her brood awaken, they will discover humanity rules even them. And he gives her a moment, and then she says, I'll trust you. I did decide that, like, years ago. I don't know about this plan, but I believe in you. And she kneels to him, and he is so relieved and so kind of... There was a sense that maybe she wouldn't be cool with this. And he just... You know, she's someone that clearly her judgment on this would matter to him. We all have our friend like this, where when we go to them, we actually do want to hear the truth. When we go to them, they usually have such a no-nonsense view that we are aware what we're going to get is the truth. And their approval means a particular thing. And that's who she is for him, it feels like. And so her agreeing to this is a big step. But then he says, I don't need to do this alone. You guys can all do it with me. Anybody we want. Over the centuries, we can discover new talent and keep doing this. And she says, first laughs, and then is like, man, without a war, me? Come on. Do you see me just like cultivating the land and making a calm and peaceful life? I don't even know what, like, no, I don't have any interest. And Alligaeus is more likely to burn everything you build to the ground. Maybe Joran will take you up on this, but I'll live my days out. I'll live out my days and be done. Oh my God, that was so hard for me. And she flies away, and he gets really angry for a moment here. He could break the binding of her intent with his own and snap her powers hold on him. That might rob her of her powers entirely, turning her vessel into a trio of ordinary skulls. I love this too. Irritation and rejection seared him like he'd swallowed acid. That is such a good descriptor. That's genuinely what it can feel like, is this like sudden, almost like sharp burning. And it's as sudden, you know, as acid burns. It's just the kind of thing that I was like, man, that really feels correct in my gut, what that's like. And then after he thinks this, he's just like, man, I can't believe I even considered that. That is fucked up. And she's just as much a part of this as me. She gets to make her own choices. And it says, he had no intention of allowing her to remain mortal, which I don't love that language, Emperor. Other secrets of the universe might yield new and exciting possibilities that she would open up to. He could wait until she agreed. After all, he had plenty of time. And that is the end of chapter 2. So, I'm very excited. I can't wait to see what happens. Asher's in the chat saying, the Green Wardens have sided with the Independents, consultants, and company. So, they weren't driven out. They bailed. And this guy was framing it like, oh, they were victims of a thing, or were victims because they're gone. That sounds right. George says, Esther is the OG badass. I love her so much. Yeah, she's delightful. And she has made me deeply want wine and cheese. So I'm going to be keeping my eye out tonight for an opportunity to go grab some. All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much to Asher for commissioning this, and to George, of course, for attending. Anybody else who's listening, hope you're enjoying it. Until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.